Good evening and welcome to TV Tuần-san News of the Week. My name is Emma Doe. In what's making headlines this week, a Vietnamese worker fatally shot by police in Taipei. China conducts military live fire drills in the South China Sea. And Vietnam takes the crown for Mrs. Universe. In this week's top story, Vietnamese migrant workers and labour rights activists have held a protest in Taiwan's capital city of Taipei following the fatal shooting of a Vietnamese worker by police. According to Taiwan News, protesters gathered on Monday in front of the National Police Agency and called for a full investigation into the death of 27-year-old Nguyễn Quốc Phi, shot many times by a police officer last Thursday. Protesters condemned police for using excessive force when trying to arrest the runaway migrant worker, which eventually led to the man's tragic death, the China Times reported. The group is demanding that surveillance footage and images of the incident be made public and for the case to be thoroughly investigated. A secretary who worked at Taiwan's representative office in Vietnam has received a 10-year jail sentence for corruption in a student visa bribery scandal. The Taiwan High Court found the Taiwanese worker Xiao Yu Wen guilty of illegally possessing 83 Louis Vuitton bags and accessories and $97,000 in cash bribes. His accomplice was Sao Pao Lin, a Taiwanese visa broker also operating in Vietnam. Sao was sentenced to 18 months in prison for document forgery by the Taipei District Court. The prosecution said the pair was colluding to approve student visas for unqualified Vietnamese looking to study in Taiwan. Vietnam has taken the crown of this year's Mrs. Universe pageant. At a ceremony in Durban in South Africa, 43-year-old Lưu Hoàng Trâm burst into tears as she accepted the title. This year, contestants of the pageant for married women were all involved in a cause that helped others, representing the pageant's slogan of empowering women, creating change. Earlier in the week, the 80-plus contestants held a peaceful march against gender-based violence, child abuse and human trafficking. The contestants marched through part of Durban, holding banners and calling for governments around the world to secure harsher sentences for those found to have abused women and children. China has dismissed Vietnamese condemnation of its military live fire exercises in the disputed South China Sea, saying it was acting within its sovereign rights. On Tuesday, Vietnam issued a sharp rebuke to China, the second of such warnings in a week as tensions rise between the countries over the disputed waterway. China conducted the drills around the Paracel Islands, an area which Vietnam claims, prompting Vietnam to say it would resolutely protect its legitimate rights through peaceful means. However, on Wednesday, the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Geng Shuang told a regular briefing that China had done nothing wrong. Meanwhile, Vietnamese fishermen continue to complain of Chinese harassment in the area. Since June this year, Vietnamese fishermen venturing into the Paracel Islands have reported being continuously chased and attacked by Chinese boats. A Vietnamese officer from the border guards in Quảng Ngãi province told the Vietnamese news website Zing that 21 fishing boats had been attacked by the Chinese in recent months. Of these, 3 boats were rammed and 2 sank. It was a similar story in the district of Binh Xuân, where the vice president of the People's Committee in the area told media that 14 boats had been attacked. The Vietnamese Minister of Agriculture and Development confirmed that China had been harassing fishermen to prevent them from fishing in the disputed Paracel Islands territory and other parts of the South China Sea. Vietnamese corporations have become an increasing target of Chinese cyber spies in a time of flaring tensions in the South China Sea. According to the cybersecurity company FireEye, a number of attacks on Vietnamese companies in recent weeks have been traced back to China. FireEye told Reuters News that the attacks involved delivering malware through sending Vietnamese documents which appeared to be a request for financial information. Once opened, the document would release a malware that would infect a computer and potentially allow cyber spies into the computer network. A spokeswoman for the Chinese Foreign Ministry said China opposed all forms of illegal internet activities and rejected being accused of espionage without cast iron proof. The Vietnamese Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Lê Thị Thu Hằng said cyber attacks should be severely punished in accordance with the law. Vietnam denies allowing cyber espionage, although FireEye has also accused it of carrying out attacks in the past. Vietnamese President Trần Đại Quang and his Egyptian counterpart Abdel Fattah el-Sisi have discussed measures to promote trade and invest between the two nations. Their talks took place in Hanoi on Wednesday. It was the first state visit by an Egyptian president to Vietnam since the two countries established diplomatic ties in 1963. Both presidents reached a consensus on strengthening exchanges of delegations at all levels, as well as coordination at regional and international forums, including the United Nations and the non-aligned movement. The two presidents also agreed to increase two-way trade to $1 billion in the near future and create more favourable conditions for bilateral cooperation. After their talks, both leaders witnessed the signing of 9 documents regarding bilateral cooperation in the fields of trade, investment, sea transport, tourism, culture and fishery. Vietnamese customs officers in Ho Chi Minh City have found hundreds of kilograms of elephant tusks hidden in 2 containers shipped from Africa. Authorities from the city-based Cat Lai port said the smuggled elephant tusks were well hidden in bitumen barrels in the containers shipped from Benin. Earlier this year, Vietnamese customs officers detected several cases of smuggled elephant tusks, rhino horns and pangolin scales, worth nearly $450,000. A former lifeguard from the Australian coastal city of Wollongong is now working with Vietnamese residents of Phu Quoc to combat the environmental danger of plastic. The environmentalist Paul Hellier recently moved to the tourist island in Vietnam, attracting a number of locals to help start a monthly beach cleanup. Hellier says plastic use on the island was excessive and that most of it ended up in the ocean. He said the key to sustaining the movement was to continue educating people about the dangers of plastic. Back to news in Australia. Australia's Vietnamese community has once again come to the defence of the cờ vàng after media reports reveal that the Vietnamese Prime Minister asked Malcolm Turnbull to stop local councils flying the flag of South Vietnam. Prime Minister Nguyễn Xuân Phúc made the request during the recent G20 meeting in July. Although Vietnam is not part of the G20 countries, Phúc and other leaders travelled to the event for sideline meetings. During his discussion with the Australian Prime Minister, Phúc raised the issue of the flag, but it's not known how Turnbull responded. Vietnam's government has long tried to get rid of the cờ vàng, the former flag of the nation before the communist takeover. To the Vietnamese community in Australia, most of whom left Vietnam as refugees during the war, the cờ vàng represents freedom and democracy. The Vietnamese community in Australia President Peter Thang Ha told the Fairfield Advance newspaper in New South Wales that the community flew the cờ vàng because they did not accept the current communist regime, which is represented by the official red flag. Nearly 800 Australian students will head to Vietnam next year to study and undertake work placements under the government's New Colombo Plan. The New Colombo Plan is an initiative which aims to lift knowledge of the Indo-Pacific region in Australia by supporting Australian undergraduates to study and undertake internships in the region. 784 students from 18 Australian universities will take part in 30 projects in Vietnam, ranging from human welfare studies and services to urban design and regional planning. In 2014, 161 Australian students went to Vietnam when the New Colombo Plan started. 3 years later, the number is 5 times higher, adding up to 1,539 students who will have experienced Vietnam by the end of 2018. That's all from TV Tuần-san News of the Week. For more stories, you can follow TV Tuần-san at tvtsonline.com.au and at Facebook at TV Tuần-san. I'm Emma Doe. Thank you so much for watching. I look forward to your company at the same time next week.